One player admitted he tried to end a man's career. Another foul literally sent someone to intensive care. And one moment was so violent, the authorities tried to pretend it never happened. These aren't just bad tackles. These are the 20 most brutal moments British football has ever survived. Old Trafford, April 21st, 2001. Roy Keane had been waiting 3.5 years for revenge. The ball was nowhere near them when Keane lunged, studs up, leg straight, going through Howland's knee like it owed him money. The crack echoed around Old Trafford. Howland crumpled immediately, screaming in agony, and everyone who saw it knew this wasn't an accident. But here's what makes this different. Keane admitted it in his autobiography. He confessed he'd done it deliberately, that he'd wanted to hurt Howland, that it was premeditated revenge. The FA fined him £150,000 just for being honest about it. Howland never played a full match again. His career limped on for 2 more years, but that knee was finished. This wasn't football, this was war, and Keane put it in writing for the world to read. Watch this again in slow motion. Pedro Mendes is chasing the ball, head turned away, completely defenceless. Ben Thatcher's forearm comes up and crack. Mendes hits the advertising boards and his body goes limp. Medics sprint on. The stadium goes silent. That horrible, guilty silence when 40,000 people think they might have just watched someone die. Mendes had seizures on the pitch. His heart went into spasm. He spent the night in intensive care, and doctors said if the blow had been an inch different, he might not have survived. The terrifying thing was how unnecessary it all was. This is where football stopped being beautiful. City were winning. The match was over. Thatcher just decided to hurt someone because he could, and Mendes paid the price for nothing. Right, this one's different. Wembley 1988 FA Cup final, first seconds of the match. Vinnie Jones walks up to Steve McMahon and, how do I put this delicately, grabs him by the bollocks and squeezes. That's it. That's the foul. The photograph became iconic. McMahon's face twisted in absolute agony, Jones grinning like he's just won the lottery. McMahon spent the rest of the match looking over his shoulder, and Liverpool's rhythm was completely destroyed. Liverpool never recovered. Wimbledon won 1-0 in one of the biggest upsets in FA Cup history. Sometimes the most brutal fouls aren't the ones that break bones. They're the ones that break your concentration and your dignity. Jones proved you could win a cup final with psychological warfare and a firm grip, and he'd do it all over again without hesitation. Kevin Muscat didn't just break one leg. He broke them systematically, methodically, like it was his job. 1998. Matty Holmes. Compound fracture. 8 months out. Career never the same. 2000. Adrian Zara. Broken leg. 2004. Craig Moore. Shattered shin. Every tackle the same. Both feet off the ground, studs showing, targeting the standing leg. Holmes went down screaming, clutching his leg, and everyone who saw it knew it was serious. The leg was broken, not just a simple fracture, but a compound break that required surgery and months of rehabilitation. What made this sickening wasn't one tackle, it was the pattern. Muscat did this sort of thing regularly, collecting leg-breaking tackles like other players collected caps. This wasn't football, this was war, and Muscat kept enlisting, season after season, with the authorities never banning him long enough to actually stop him. Freeze frame this moment. Andy Cole is watching the ball. Neil Ruddock's elbow is cocked like a weapon. Then, boom! Cole hits the turf, blood pouring from his mouth, completely unconscious. He lay there motionless for what felt like an eternity, while medics sprinted across the pitch. When they finally got him sitting up, Cole was dazed, confused, asking where he was. Ruddock got a yellow card. A yellow. For what was essentially assault with a deadly elbow in front of 40,000 witnesses. Cole spent the night being checked for concussion and was never quite as brave running onto through balls after that. Ruddock walked away grinning, like he'd done nothing more serious than nutmeg someone. But this next foul makes all of those look mild. I need to warn you about this one. Old Trafford, April 8th, 1996. David Busst's leg buckled and the compound fracture was so severe that bones pierced through his sock. Look at Peter Schmeichel's face. He turns away and vomits on the pitch. Grown men in the crowd are crying. Players from both teams are frozen, unable to process what they've just witnessed. Busst was lying there with his leg bent at an angle that legs simply don't bend, blood soaking through his sock and forming a pool on the Old Trafford turf. Busst needed 26 pints of blood during surgery. That's more than twice what's in the human body. His career ended at 29. He came within hours of amputation and needed 22 operations over 2 years just to save the leg. This wasn't malicious. No studs up, no revenge tackle, just the cruel mathematics of bones and angles going catastrophically wrong. This is where football stopped being beautiful. Sometimes the game itself is brutal enough without any help from the players. If your jaw's already on the floor, hit like. And if you've seen worse than this, subscribe, because the next 14 fouls are on another level entirely. Van Nistelrooy's penalty crashes off the crossbar. Arsenal players mob him. Keown's jumping on his back. Lauren's pushing him. But Patrick Vieira? He waits. Cool, calculating, patient as a sniper. Months later, Vieira's studs find Van Nistelrooy's Achilles in a challenge that was pure, calculated revenge. High, late, vicious. He caught him on the Achilles with enough force to make Van Nistelrooy scream. Van Nistelrooy was hobbling for weeks afterwards, and Arsenal players joked that Vieira had finally sorted him out. The referee misses it completely, but slow-motion replays show everything. Vieira deliberately targeting the ankle, the parts that end careers. This wasn't football, this was war, and Vieira had been planning it for months, waiting for the perfect moment when nobody was watching too closely. Fourth Division. January afternoon. Nobody's watching. Steve Tilson nutmegs Roy McDonough, and McDonough loses his mind. He flies in two-footed, red card. His studs shredded Tilson's sock, and blood was pouring down his leg immediately. Then he spits at Tilson. Then, and this is where it gets mental, he headbutts the referee. Not a push, a full Glasgow kiss that leaves the ref staggering, concussed, unable to officiate another game that season. Police escort him down the tunnel. 10-match ban, £500 fine, enormous money for a 4th Division player in 1986, all because his ego couldn't handle being nutmegged in a meaningless 4th Division match. McDonough had ended careers and hospitalised a referee because he couldn't control his temper. Absolute madness that showed how thin the line was between competitive aggression and criminal violence. Duncan Ferguson headbutted Jock McStay in a Scottish Premier Division match. Straight red, standard ban. Everyone moves on, right? Wrong. The authorities prosecuted him criminally. Ferguson turned around and headbutted McStay square in the face with such force that McStay dropped like he'd been shot. The red card was immediate, but what happened next made history. Ferguson became the first British footballer sent to actual prison for an on-field incident. 44 days in Barlinnie, one of Scotland's toughest jails, sharing a cell with actual criminals. The judge said Ferguson's celebrity status meant he should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. This genuinely could have ended in prison, and it did, the moment British football's culture of violence finally faced the law and players realised that the worst consequence wasn't a ban, it was a criminal record. St Andrew's 3rd minute. Eduardo bursts through. Martin Taylor lunges. The crack is audible throughout the stadium. Eduardo's ankle is literally hanging off, an open fracture that required emergency surgery and 9 months out. Look at Taylor's face after the tackle. Genuine horror at what he's done. Taylor wasn't a dirty player, and his face showed he was devastated at what had happened. But here's the thing. Taylor wasn't dirty. This was just millimetres and milliseconds, combining in the worst possible way. Eduardo came back and played professionally for another decade, but he was never the same explosive forward. Something had been taken that surgery couldn't fix. The fearlessness, the willingness to burst into the box without thinking about consequences. This is where football stopped being beautiful. Every time Eduardo approached a defender afterwards, part of his brain was remembering that moment at St Andrews. Selhurst Park, January 1995. Cantona's been sent off. He's walking off when a Palace fan starts hurling abuse, vile personal insults that fans had been shouting at players for decades with impunity. Watch what happens next. Cantona launches himself into the crowd, both feet off the ground, kung fu kick straight to the chest. Then he starts throwing punches at anyone within reach. Security guards grabbed Cantona, but he broke free and kept swinging at Simmons and anyone else within reach. 8-month ban, £20,000 fine, criminal conviction, and 120 hours community service. But here's what matters. For a century, fans could say anything to players and hide behind their season tickets. Cantona said enough. He shattered that barrier forever, and football's never been the same. The kung fu kick was reckless and stupid, but it started a conversation about fan behaviour that continues today. If you think that was dark, wait for this. St James's Park, Newcastle are losing 3-0. Lee Bowyer and Kieran Dyer, teammates, supposedly friends, start arguing over a pass. The argument becomes pushing. The pushing becomes punches. Bowyer threw the first proper punch, catching Dyer on the jaw. In front of 52,000 fans, two players wearing the same shirt are battering each other on the turf, while their teammates try to pull them apart. Dyer retaliated with a wild swing that connected with Bowyer's nose, and both players were grappling on the ground. Both sent off. Both fined 6 weeks' wages. The FA considered banning them for life because teammates fighting each other brought the game into disrepute in a way no ordinary foul ever could. Newcastle won one of their last 9 matches. The image of two teammates fighting became the symbol of everything wrong with football. Overpaid egos putting themselves ahead of the team, and a club ripping itself apart in front of the world. Wembley, FA Cup final. Gazza's big moment. 15 minutes in, he flies at Gary Charles with a tackle so reckless, he damages his own cruciate ligament. Gascoigne's lunge was out of control, studs showing, catching Charles on the chest and lifting him clean off the ground. Within minutes, he's hobbling. By half-time, his knee is the size of a grapefruit. He plays on, one-legged, because it's the cup final. Spurs win, but Gazza's injury changes everything. Surgery, months of rehab. Missed his immediate chance to sign for Lazio and never reached the heights everyone predicted. The tackle meant to intimidate Forest ended up destroying the most gifted English player of his generation. Gascoigne was brilliant enough to dominate matches without needing to hurt people, but his lack of self-control meant he hurt himself more than anyone. Genius destroying itself through pure recklessness in the saddest possible way. This wasn't even a match. Manchester City's training ground. Tuesday morning, Joey Barton and Ousmane Darboe disagree over a tackle. Barton snaps, punching Darboe repeatedly until he's unconscious with blood pouring from his head. During a routine practice drill, words were exchanged, and then Barton just lost control completely. Darboe wakes up in hospital with a detached retina threatening his sight. He was off work for months, suffering from headaches and blurred vision that threatened to end his career. Barton pleaded guilty to assault, got a suspended sentence, and paid £3,000 compensation. £3,000 for nearly blinding someone. Laughably inadequate. Darboe's career never recovered. He left City and drifted through lower leagues before retiring early. This wasn't football. This was war, except it was supposed to be practice, where teammates are meant to be working together, not committing GBH. European Championship semi-final. Wembley. Dobrivoj Trivic kicks Alan Mullery for the 3rd time. Mullery turns and kicks him straight back. No ball. Pure retaliation. First England player ever sent off in a senior international. The shock of it reverberated through English football. We'd always prided ourselves on fair play, and now our player had been sent off on home soil. But watch what manager Alf Ramsey does. He goes onto the pitch, puts his arm around Mullery, tells him it's all right. The same Alf Ramsey who'd preached discipline and control when winning the World Cup 2 years earlier was now publicly supporting violent retaliation. The message was clear. If provoked enough, violence is acceptable. The FA's punishment was minimal because Ramsey had essentially endorsed the kick. The death of the amateur ideal, caught on camera, showing that when push came to shove, winning mattered more than playing fair. FA Cup final. Arsenal losing. Minutes left. 17-year-old Paul Allen sprints towards goal with only Willie Young to beat. Young doesn't even think about it. He wraps both arms around Allen from behind and drags him down like a bouncer, removing a troublemaker. Allen went sprawling, the goal chance was gone, and West Ham's momentum was killed stone dead. Straight red. But Young had calculated it. Better to lose a player than concede a goal. He invented the tactical foul. The idea that fouling someone to prevent a goal was admirable, even noble. Taking one for the team, they called it. It killed something beautiful. The idea that if you beat your man, you deserved your reward. Young proved that if you were good enough, smart defenders would just foul you and accept the punishment. It was effective, it was cynical, and it changed how defenders thought about their jobs forever. Camp Nou, 1983. Andoni Goicoechea, the butcher of Bilbao, runs from 10 yards and scythes through Diego Maradona's ankle. The crack was audible throughout the stadium, and Maradona's ankle was shattered in 3 places. 3 fractures, 4 months out. Career altered forever. Maradona later said that tackle changed how he played, making him more suspicious and quicker to retaliate. Now here's why this matters to British football. We studied him. We imported his methods. Throughout the 1980s, every skillful foreign player coming to England got the same welcome, a leg-breaking tackle to let them know they're in a game. Players like Zola, Juninho and Ginola all suffered horrific tackles from British defenders who'd learned that if you couldn't match someone's skill, you could break their legs instead. We turned intimidation into an art form and wore it as a badge of honour. This wasn't football, this was war, and Britain weaponised it for an entire decade. Ben Arfa nutmegs 3 City players with one piece of skill. Beautiful. Pure magic that left 3 defenders sitting on the turf, humiliated. 60 seconds later, Nigel de Jong launches himself from 8 yards away and snaps both Ben Arfa's tibia and fibula. The tibia was broken, the fibula was broken, and Ben Arfa was left writhing on the pitch in absolute agony. Out 6 months, never the same player. When he came back, he was never the same fearless dribbler who'd take on entire defences. But here's what made this sickening. Half the pundits afterwards said Ben Arfa had asked for it by showboating. We'd become a football culture that punished brilliance and rewarded brutality. If you were too skillful, if you embarrassed opponents, you'd get hurt, and people would say you deserved it for showing off. De Jong's tackle was a manifestation of that ugly philosophy that had infected British football. Charity Shield, literally a friendly. Tommy Smith and Billy Bremner end up fighting in the centre circle, pulling each other's shirts off, both sent off for 11 matches. The match descended into chaos with 6 yellow cards and constant brawling before the captains literally stripped each other. But before that, Smith had accidentally clattered his own teammate Kevin Keegan, reminding him who Liverpool's real hardman was. Violence was so embedded in British football that even in glorified friendlies, players were trying to hurt each other. Smith later said it was just robust football, that he'd done nothing wrong, and it was all part of the game. Everyone else called it what it was, assault in football boots. That attitude, that violence was normal, expected, even admirable, defined an entire generation of British footballers who couldn't separate competition from combat. Everything you've seen in this list, every leg breaker, every elbow, every tactical assault, traces back to one man, Frank Barson. Playing in the 1920s, he pioneered it all. The elbow to the ribs when jumping for headers, the subtle stamp on the standing foot, the art of kicking someone's leg while appearing to go for the ball. He studied how to hurt opponents without the referee noticing. Sent off 12 times when referees tolerated everything. Broke an opponent's jaw with an elbow and claimed he was just competing for the ball. Headbutted a referee who dared to give a decision against him and got banned for 7 months. But here's the thing. He wasn't just a thug. He was brilliant. Captained Aston Villa to the FA Cup, Manchester United to promotion, a footballer good enough that managers tolerated his violence. He proved you could build a successful career on intimidation, that being violent enough made you valuable even when you crossed every line. British football spent the next century following his blueprint, creating generations of hardmen who thought hurting opponents was just part of the job description. This wasn't football. This was war. And Barson wrote the manual that every brutal defender studied for the next 100 years. Football was never meant to be violent, but in these moments it wasn't sport, it was survival. From premeditated revenge to accidental horror, these 20 fouls show the darkest side of the beautiful game. Hit subscribe, the next video is already waiting, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.